We are now joined by a former official in the United States Trade Representative's office, Steve Gill. Thanks for joining us, Steve.
Thanks, Scotty.
Okay, so does this change in leadership in Kazakhstan affect the trade relationship between the United States and China right now?
Well, it can. Sometimes these small countries that most Americans couldn't find on a map, as you point out, have significant linchpin positions, again, in the fact that they have oil resources that the Russians have had access to, that China might like to have access to, puts them in a good negotiating position. I think the long relationship with Kazakhstan and Russia, particularly the former leader who is essentially going to pick his successor, and Vladimir Putin, gives Russia the edge. But it does give an opportunity perhaps for China, and as changing alliances emerge, it can kind of change some of the other world economic factors as well, including the U.S.-China trade talks.
Everything kind of all fits in together like a puzzle. So if this new Kazakh president is friendly to China, what do they stand to gain by being an ally of them in trade at the very least?
Well, I think, first of all, just by having another suitor may make Russia make better deals, pursue them more aggressively. It's kind of like if a guy's pursuing two different women, it makes it a little bit easier to negotiate with each of them and maybe have to sweeten the pot a little bit. You've got Kazakhstan now that has two different suitors, and I think they may play China to get an edge with Russia, or maybe play Russia to get an edge with China.
Or they might get dumped by both in the end if they demand too much. Talking about
when both of them figure out what they're doing, then they're going to get completely shut out of the deal, as happens so often. And
you know, hopefully they have a better job of keeping secrets than necessarily the United States administration and our trade representatives do. U.S. and China are set to ramp up trade talks again. In fact, next week we were supposed to have those talks here in the United States. They all fell through. Where are we at this point, Steve?
Well, I think it kind of follows into the Huawei or the highway negotiations that are going on in Europe right now. You've got a lot of different pressures that are playing into this China trade, U.S. trade negotiation. What's going on in Kazakhstan may have an impact. What's going on in Europe in the 5G dispute that you all covered earlier. All of those things do kind of push the edge of the envelope a little bit. You throw in the North Korean negotiations as well. There's a lot going on here, which is, I think, why we've seen a delay of about a month beyond what they thought would bring about a result. When you look at what the U.S. Trade Representative Lighthizer is saying, he seems very optimistic that they're going to be making a deal. They're traveling to China over the next few days to try and wrangle the final details, and then the Chinese are going to be coming to the U.S. I think what the Chinese looked at is that President Trump showed up in North Korea to negotiate a deal without a deal already being done, and it fell apart. The Chinese don't want to get in a similar situation. They want a firm deal in place before President Xi and President Trump meet.
Well, that's the question right now, because we look at, whether it's the Mueller deal coming out or trade with China deal coming. We've had a lot of teases that's come out of this administration. Do you think actually time has helped the relationship, the negotiations, or would it have been better off if we would have just gotten it settled quickly when this first started a few months ago?
No, I think that when you get a trade deal, there is going to be a surge for the U.S. economy, because suddenly industries and agriculture economies in particular that have been stifled because of the inability to put their goods into China are going to get a free market opened back up to them. They're going to sell more stuff. That's going to have a positive surge for the American economy. The Chinese also desperately need a deal because their economy is slowing as well. So as we've talked for a couple of months now, both China and U.S. have a big incentive to get a deal done. But they've got to get it done right, not rushed. And I think that's where President Trump has been. Getting the trade barriers, getting the tariffs negotiated is one thing, but you've also got to deal with the intellectual property issues, which they seem to be making progress on. You've also got to deal with currency. You've got to deal with the concern about intelligence, as again reflected by the 5G battle in Europe. So there's a lot of stuff, but they are getting into those final details. And I think, again, we'll see a detailed agreement before President Xi and President Trump meet.
Well, and that would be nice if it's actually released to the public as well, as so many times we don't know all the details. Thank you so much for joining us, Steve.
Thanks, Scotty.